Thanks, Andrew, for that. Really good report. Okay, we might... 10:30, perfect. We might go now into the residents' survey. So we've got Kath here and Peter is there too. And Lynn as well. Great, so I know you've got a presentation. Do you want to talk us through it? Take as much time as you need because it's pretty important.
Thank you.
Right, good morning, back again. I think most of you know Kath Jameson, who heads up the monitoring and research team. She'll be talking to the bulk of the technical data this morning. Just a few slides to kick things off. This will contain both what we've heard from residents, but also some of the steps we're taking in response to that. It's early days, the data's fairly new, so those responses, this is just a starting position on how we're going to be tackling that. Some of these results do affect levels of service target achievement. From memory, while there are some ups and there's some downs, they net out to about neutral. So the impact of the resident survey doesn't really change our level of service achievement overall. Kath will take you through those areas of highest satisfaction with council, as well as those where there's more focus needed. The overall satisfaction figure and the reputation and trust questions. This is a major part of our performance framework. Of course, we measure objective things, quantity, quality, turnaround time, responsiveness to our customers. All those scientific measures do have a place, but so do subjective views from our customers, from our community. And that's one of the reasons why these form part of our levels of service and performance framework. There are two types of survey. The general satisfaction survey is for things that virtually everybody in the city uses, like roads and water. Their views on that will be informed because they are familiar with what we do. The point of contact surveys are more for specific services that not everybody uses. So asking an elderly lady about our marinas, for example, may not have a lot of point to it. So what we do is we go to people who've just experienced that service and say to them, look, you've just done that. We'd like to know what you thought of how we did. So two different tools for two different purposes. These are also boosted by Life in Christchurch. I should just go back and just briefly say, look, this survey's been running now for at least 15, 17 years that I know of. It's, I believe, the largest survey run in Christchurch. So it's a pretty good understanding across our demographics and geography of what people are thinking out there. We ask different people each time. There's a process to make sure we're not repeating ourselves with frequent flyers, so to speak. So they're fresh people every time we run the survey. Now, context, yeah, look, there may be some unusual factors. There are, I guess, unusual factors almost every time we run this thing. But we do have some one-offs this year. The reform programs are definitely an unusual factor in what we do. And perhaps also in the public imagination. Around Three Waters is a significant thing in the public mind. COVID's still out there, whether it's people having their second or third rounds or simply impacts on our supply chains. And there are some things that happen out of the blue. We've had 2 wet summers in a row. That's obviously impacted areas like parks where anybody who's looking at their own yard will know it just keeps coming right late into the year. So there's some issues in there to be considered in terms of some of the results. I think I might hand over at this point.
Sure. So we're presenting to you the resident survey results today. This is part of our continuous improvement, really focusing on our residents, what they're telling us about the services that they receive, and also identifying what are the things that we can do to improve their experience and their levels of satisfaction. So I'm not going to go through the detail of every single service, obviously. You did receive in November of last year an update on our continuous improvement process and the initiatives that were taken as a result of last year's survey. There will be an opportunity as part of the co-development of the long-term plan from July onwards to really zero in on individual services and understand where heads of service are aiming to continue to enhance their service. But in the interim, what I'll do today is simply highlight a few of the initiatives to try and improve and enhance that service delivery. So here you've got some categories of the areas that we're working on. One at the forefront is communication and engagement. That has been an area identified in the survey for a number of years. And just as recently as last week, you heard from the heads of service, Katie McRae, on some of the initiatives we are taking, with the very helpful input from the Councillor Engagement Working Party last year. And this is an ongoing area of focus. We need to lift our game in terms of engaging with our residents and improving understanding and their ability to engage with council processes. As Peter said, we're also focusing on those levels of service and how we can better deliver to those in the coming years. You heard from the head of parks the other day about alternative ways of addressing those services. So what I'm indicating is each of the heads of service has a plan and is looking to move and enhance that service as they're during the normal course of business. We're also working closely with partners. This is an area where the community has given us feedback that we do really well. And what we'd like to do is build on that and ensure that we're continuing to partner and collaborate with community groups, with mana whenua, with ECAN, and with others in our community, because together we definitely can do better. Just moving on to some more specifics, and I'll just highlight a couple. For example, in relation to road and footpath maintenance and resurfacing, as you're aware, there's been $2 million allocated in the forthcoming annual plan to ensure that the roving footpath maintenance crews are able to be put in place. And this is a really specific initiative designed to address some specific feedback from our residents. Likewise, in relation to the engagement action plan, the head of service will be coming to you within the next 2 weeks with some examples of what we can do differently to improve our engagement with youth, with multicultural communities, and with people with disabilities in particular, to help them engage with council processes, because typically we have not got as much engagement from those groups of people. So I will leave it there. As you can see, there are a number of different initiatives to improve. I'll then move over to inviting Kath to share with us the survey results for this year.
So in terms of levels of service target achievement, more services met their targets this year than last. So 75%, 3/4 of the levels of service that relate to resident satisfaction met their targets, and 1/4 didn't. And the ones that didn't tend to be mainly maintenance-related service targets. There's a bit of a disconnect between target performance and overall satisfaction. The lines at the top are the overall satisfaction score across the last few years, and the bars are our service performance. So you can see that there is a bit of a disconnect there, but we set more realistic targets, but resident expectations are not necessarily aligned as closely to that, especially in relation to value for money spent. Higher satisfaction services, so these are the ones that scored 85% or more satisfaction. And they are similar services to the ones that scored high satisfaction last year. So we've got the walk-in and phone customer service, so that's where people have direct interaction with staff. Libraries, Botanic Gardens in Mona Vale, cemetery administration services, Hagley Park, recreation and sport facilities, and support, and then education programs and community events. So success is closely tied to those resident interactions with the council, especially around staff manner and support, and where people perceive we listen to people, where we have good maintenance, where we provide reliable services, and where we have community partnerships. And the areas that are best delivered by the council So these were the same as over the last 2 years. Curbside waste is still the best service. And people see that generally as a good service. The 3-bin system is appreciated, it's reliable and efficient, and people are talking about the bin app being really helpful. Parks and reserves, people see these as well presented and maintained. They keep the city looking nice, and people appreciate the open spaces. Service satisfaction trends since last year. Services that saw satisfaction improvements of 5% or more. More services improved their satisfaction scores compared to last year, and those that are scoring 5% or more improvement since last year: cemeteries presentation, external communications, water supply quality, on-street parking, community events, community parks, parks heritage buildings, events and festivals generally in terms of the range that we provide, promotion around things that are happening in the city, and curbside recycling. Services that saw a 5% decline in satisfaction or more: event support, regional park recreation and ecological experiences and presentation, resource consenting, off-street parking safety, and the bus interchange and hubs. So lower satisfaction services, so these are the ones that score under 50% satisfaction. So again, similar to last year, decision making around people feeling that they've had a say and that our processes are easy to use, and their understanding of and influence over decision making and decisions that are made that are in the best interests of the city. Stormwater drainage is still an issue, as is road and footpath condition. And these are closely tied to customer service issues as well, and expectation management, people feeling that we're not listening. We're prioritising the nice to haves at the expense of the core services. Inaccurate or insufficient information and advice provided to people, asset maintenance issues, perceptions of safety, and expectations not necessarily matching the delivery cost realities. So the areas that the council most needs to improve, roading is still the area that's most needing improvement, and that's been the case for many years now, including before the earthquakes. So that's around uneven surfaces of the roads and potholes not being fixed, that we don't promptly repair things, and that we're doing ongoing patch repairs, the disruption caused by roadworks, cycle lanes at the expense of other roading issues, and the impact that has on traffic flows and parking. And as I said, that was the same pretty much as last year. And then council decision making and financial management. So the disapproval around our spending decisions, people feeling that we're not listening to resident needs and priorities. So overall organisation service performance, dissatisfaction is down compared to last year. But overall satisfaction hasn't really shifted. It's consistent with last year on 43%. We asked people the reasons why they gave the satisfaction score that they did. And of those who are satisfied, people see councillors doing a good job and more are happy with the services provided compared to last year. Dissatisfaction, we've got quite a few more comments on that. Unhappiness with the roads and road maintenance still sits up there as a high rating one, and as we were talking about earlier, disapproval of council spending. And those less likely to be satisfied, Pacific peoples, Maori, those aged 25 to 49 years, and those aged 50 to 64 years. Reputation and trust. So these are some new questions that we've added in this year. So there are 14 measures of reputation and trust, and they remain a real challenge for us. The average positive rating was 28%, and the average very positive rating was only 4%. Average negative rating, 38%, very negative, 13%. So as I said, a real challenge there. And if we look at the things that make up the reputation and trust ratings there. The lower scoring ones were council making wise spending decision, value for ratepayers' money, and council communicating clearly how people's views have informed decisions. And what I would say is that these results, where these sorts of questions are asked by other bigger councils, are not too dissimilar, and some of our scores are a little better, some not so great. So just some concluding observations, some mixed results, but some notable improvements. More services are meeting their targets, more improve their satisfaction scores. However, our overall satisfaction hasn't increased, but we've seen a decrease in dissatisfaction and greater happiness with services provided. Reputation and trust remain a challenge. We're lagging behind improvements in some areas and services. Resident concerns are impacting perceptions of the organisation as a whole. Residents are continuing to expect more of the council, particularly around key infrastructure delivery. They're judging us poorly on how we're making spending decisions and on our ability to demonstrate how our decisions have taken their views and priorities into account. We've got some improvement areas, but we're basically, such as roads, where these are areas that require significant expenditure to address. So we've got some issues managing people's expectations versus what we've actually got available to actually deliver on these things. So that's...
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive presentation. I think it was useful to spend the time going through it today, given the significance. We've definitely got questions, I'm sure. I just had one around the water supply, and so I think, and I don't know on what slide it was, Kath, but it was one where it had like 24% was roading, 6% was footpaths, and I think water supply was about 8%, 9%. So how will that, if we're thinking about this for next year, because I imagine that a large part of the disgruntlement there is around chlorination in the water, and now with the regulation, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, if we have no say in it, can that number change next year, or are we still going to get bad feedback on something we have no control over?
I think it's going to be an issue of communication and managing people's understanding of what's happened here. I mean, the reality is people are probably still going to mention chlorination of the water because it's a really significant issue for people here, and people don't like it. So I think we can explain the fact that we don't have a say, but I suspect people will still choose to demonstrate their dissatisfaction with things like odour and taste.
So maybe to put it a different way, does the survey just capture what's in our control, or is it external factors as well? So
it measures targets that are in our long-term plan.
Yep.
So we'll go into year 3 this year now. So in the next coming survey, the questions will still reflect things like odour and taste, but we have the opportunity, I suppose, in the new LTP, if we feel that issues to do with that are not within our control, that we may choose to look at changing perhaps some of the focus of the questions to things that are more...
Well, I guess, because I'm kind of... I guess I see the value in it. Like, I think it's a brilliant survey, and it reflects the fact people aren't happy with roading and footpath and the like, and sometimes the way we spend money. But you'd kind of go, actually, if we can't control the water supply issues, then aren't we just going to continually beat ourselves up if we're measuring against a target that government won't listen to us on?
So maybe collect the data but put a filter on the response so it doesn't end up as a statistic against us.
Yeah, so I'll go here and then here, you go.
Just in terms of the activity plans which we're working on at the moment, part of that is reviewing the levels of service, and we're looking at especially the Three Waters ones in terms of what's going to be appropriate after the new entity comes into effect, but also the things that we don't have control over. So you're absolutely right. We need to look at it.
That's really useful. So I've got Sarah, Vic, Tim, Yanni.
Kia ora, thanks so much. The information is really comprehensive. I'm interested in the reputation and trust measures, and so that slide. It's a really interesting one because we have two councils, if you like. We have an elected council and we have the council organisation. Do you think that people differentiate between the two, particularly when they're answering things? I don't know if you get a flavour of sort of any sort of words and things that come through. Some of it specifically mentions mayors and councillors, but I think that there's a bit of overlap there.
I think there is overlap. I think people, generally speaking, see the council and probably do combine us together in terms of the staff and elected representatives. We do ask specifically in this one, in these questions about mayor and councillors and then staff doing a good job. So you know we can get those results broken down. But generally speaking, across a lot of the resident survey, people don't necessarily separate it out. They don't even necessarily separate out different units within the council. They just see the council.
Yeah. So, and because you look at the one where, you know, the council understands the needs of residents and what they care about, and actually there's probably two quite different parts if you looked at the elected members and looked at the organisation. Yeah, it's just interesting. Thanks.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that, raising that, Sarah. I think it's a really important point. My comment is around the expectation and reality that is really out of whack, completely out of whack. Surely this is nothing new. This has been going on for some time, and yet we haven't been able to turn those stats around really, or influence that in any way. So I'm really keen to understand what is it specifically that we will be doing differently to try and alter that.
Maybe I could jump in there. Look, it seems to vary a lot from service to service. I mean, the expectations and reality around waste or the libraries or parks seem pretty well aligned, and people are pretty happy with it. Roading is a good example of the expectations and the reality. How many years it will take to get our roads back to pre-quake levels is probably not well understood out in the community, or even the fact that we can't fix all the roads in 1 year. If we did, you wouldn't be able to travel on any of the main arterials. So yeah, for certain services there is a dissonance between what people expect and maybe what we can afford or what we can actually deliver in a post-COVID environment. And so I think there's already been some discussion there about the communications challenge, to break that down for people in a way they can actually grasp the nature of the problem and the logistics of the problem and also the financials around the problem. I mean, if we were to try, for example, an absurd argument, if we tried to fix all the roads in Christchurch in 1 year, not only would the logistics be very tough, but the cost would be tough as well.
Thanks, Peter. I understand it's pretty challenging. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting with things that we're doing best and things that we need to improve, because in parks and rec, so it's number 2 on the we're doing best, but it's about number 8th on the worst. So, and you go from 15% to 4%. So it would be really good, because I know that Andrea and myself have sports clubs which are unsatisfied at the moment. So it would be really good to sit down with those teams and work out how this and what this is and what's it. Because if you look at parks overall, people go to the Botanic Gardens and Hagley Park and they love it, but they may not go to their local park and feel the same joy. So I think that would be really good to understand a bit better.
And I think some of what it shows is that people have different views. I mean, some people think the roads are great. Some people think the parks are brilliant, all of them, and others think they're terrible. You're just getting, because we survey so many people, a lot of diverse views on this. And I suppose that then comes back to why we have challenges around people seeing that our spending decisions may not be wise, or that we're not focusing on their priorities, because there are different priorities that people have, and we're probably never going to satisfy everyone around these things.
And I apologise, I've only kind of looked over the top of it, because it's a huge amount of work you guys have done, and it's absolutely outstanding. It really is. I do agree with Sam. But when we break it down, have we surveyed separately sports versus other recreation, and then have we looked at different types of sports and seasonal, etc.?
Yeah, we do. We get a list of the various
clubs.
sports clubs, and people, and then we have interviewers who go out to sports grounds and people who live around them. So we do a wide range of surveying.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, given the feedback that we've had, is there any proposal to change the capital program or the operational program to respond to the key concerns that residents are raising through the survey?
At a process level, we supply these results to heads of service as part of building their activity plans and their levels of service. And that has always been the case in every LTP. So this information is front and centre for the heads of when they build the plans that they're bringing to you. And in those plans, you'll see, for example, a level of service around maintenance or parks or libraries with its history, with its past performance, where it's trending, and that should help you understand where you should set your goals now when those presentations are made to you.
You know, the frustration is, like, if you take the key actions to address resident feedback, communication engagement with residents, and we've known that for a number of years now. You've got in the presentation factors outside of council's control include above average summer rainfall, affecting maintenance-based levels of service, the wastewater treatment plant fire impacting perceptions in affected locations. But what's and we've just heard this morning a deputation, what's frustrating people is that we develop a plan, we don't meet the plan timelines, but we don't communicate when things go wrong. We wait for people to complain before we respond. Now, this is something that has been on an annual basis generally raised by some of us around this table. So when are we going to get to a point as an organisation where we actually try to be proactive around when things aren't going right, we tell people rather than wait for people to complain? Because you'll also see in here there's a number of people complaining about the CSR system as well and how complaints are dealt with.
So I'll pick that up, Yanni. I think it's fair to say that improvements actually have been made. Have we got there yet? Absolutely not. And the example that we went through yesterday was when we didn't manage to be as proactive as we should be. But I think we're a very long way away from where we were a year ago. So I think lessons are being learned and are gradually being refined so that we do get to a much more proactive and, I guess, empathetic response to residents, because I think that's what they need and deserve.
Has the in terms of the kind of key issues, do we have a risk register or a radar that has, you know, what the kind of top risks are, the top levels of dissatisfaction, and then how we're mitigating the risk around that perception getting worse? Because I would have thought with something like the wastewater treatment plant fire, we've already got a comms and engagement plan, we've got an interim recovery plan, that there should be documentation around, you know, here's what we do, here's how we communicate.
So there is a communications plan, and that is being relied on and refined as we go.
Move around. We can come back to you, Yanni, though. Tyrone.
Kia ora. There's something I can't quite get my head around with all of this, so I'm going to take a bit of a helicopter view. So, I mean, from what I see, like, we've got this magnificent city that is incredible to live in. It's great to get around. It's got magnificent facilities. It's a great place to bring up children. It's got wonderful buildings. It's got a great central city that people love to come to. It's vibrant.
And the question is,
yeah, I'm getting there. So there are all these incredible things going on, and yet this, like, it's like this mass cognitive dissonance thing going on where we've got all of this stuff. So the question is, Mr. Chair, I could go on. What is and I see a lot of really hard-working people around this room who, in my view...
So there'll be an opportunity for debate. We want... seriously, I've got like 15 people that want questions.
Sorry, who are doing a great job. So is there and Peter kind of touched on it, is there some kind of bigger thing going on that you're picking up within the survey that isn't just about roads and just people's unhappiness with potholes, which is sort of increasing because of climate change and all that? So is there kind of some kind of bigger thing? Like, are we just over it? Is it because we've had the biggest infrastructure kind of
I think
problem?
that's the longest question in council history. So
Yeah,
they could
I think-
potentially try and give you a very succinct answer. Yeah.
So just trying to work through exactly what the question is, but we
Bigger? Is there something deeper to all of this than just potholes?
well, yes, there's more to it than just potholes, but I think what has to be remembered is that this survey process focuses only on measuring levels of service targets for the council. We also do a lot of surveys that look at bigger picture issues in the city, that look at some of the things that you talked about some of the great things about living in Christchurch. And so our Life in Christchurch survey, the Quality of Life survey, actually does measure some of those issues. So we've got a lot of information that also talk about the really good things that people appreciate about living in our city.
Maybe I could just dive in very, very quickly. This isn't about whether we like Christchurch at that big level, or whether Christchurch is great or terrific, or any of those things that I think we all accept and acknowledge. It asks very specific questions about very specific services. The interesting thing for me is that even though we're asking hundreds and hundreds of people, different people, they give us the same result every year. Like within sometimes 1 or 2% of the previous 1,000 people. And so you have to think, well, there's definitely something there. They love these ones consistently. They don't love these ones consistently. We probably need to hear that. But it doesn't measure any kind of aspects of mental health. It's really about services.
So one
That's a very helpful answer, actually. Yeah, that's kind of what I was...
So the other thing to bear in mind is when you ask people these sorts of questions, as Katie said the other day, typically you will hear more from the people who are dissatisfied. So I think that's not to say they are not valid views. They are absolutely valid views, and we need to put them into a continuous improvement process. But it's highly unlikely that people will say they're 100% satisfied with roads. It is very unlikely to happen. So I think that the difference between the services is significant. I think we can celebrate the fact we have so many services which are 85% and above. That is a very strong endorsement from our residents and community that we're getting a lot of things right. In addition, we do need to focus on those areas which they're saying we haven't got it right yet. And those do include roads. Some of those are legacies and some of them are because we haven't yet spent the additional money we have put on budget to address precisely what they've told us. So we are in the middle of making progress on those elements. We also have a community which is, I think, experiencing stress, as are a lot of communities, and there's quite a lot of frustration and dissatisfaction generally in communities, and some of that is being expressed here. So we need to take that on board in terms of our engagement communications processes.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer, and Mr. Chair, I appreciate you humouring me for that.
No problem. You have broken into everyone else's morning tea, so it doesn't worry me. No. Yeah. No. Very good question. Hey, just in terms of what we're going to do, because we have got externals coming in, and I'm aware there are people obviously waiting for them as well. We're going to break in 10 minutes at 11:15 for 15 minutes, and 11:30 we're going to do Christchurch NZ, CCHL, and then we're going to come back to this because I've got a list of questions, and I don't want to rush us through the resident survey. I think that would be not a good thing for the city.
Wait, sorry, just Sam, could we do CCHL first? Just mindful of, after that when we come back from the
No,
break.
so we're doing Christchurch NZ first. Yeah.
We've got externals all planned.
Yeah.
Can't we just swap around to?
No, because they're waiting.
Okay, so next up is the mayor. You got questions? No. Oh, you're just in debate. Okay, Pauline, the deputy mayor.
Thank you. My question is, how does this survey of ours compare to other councils around New Zealand? So because all councils have to do this, don't they? We all do them. So how do we compare?
I think we're not too dissimilar to some of the other big cities. If we're looking at, for example, the overall satisfaction score, which is one that a number of big cities have, compared to some, we're actually doing pretty well.
So it's a general, what Tyrone is pointing out, it seems to be a general
It's
kind of a response.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. Good to know.
Tyler. Yep.
Kia ora. I've got a couple of quick questions. One of them is around the levels of service, and I saw that Māori and Pasifika people are significantly less happy with the services that are given. That's page 18 on the report, page 113 on the agenda. Out of those services, we have 17 total services. The New Zealand Europeans are out of 11 out of 6 they're quite happy with. But when you see Māori and Pasifika, it's around 5 or 6. Can you talk to me about the other services that they're not happy with, just in broadness? Because that's a bit of a standout for me.
I would need to look in more detail at that. I don't have that directly in front of me, so I can get back to you on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd love to take that offline. And the second question is around the council stuff. I noticed that the Treaty of Waitangi was number 1 in satisfaction rates. Can you tell me, do you have a breakdown on what ethnicities gave positive feedback on that?
Yes, I do. Probably not surprisingly, Māori were least likely to agree with that.
Yep.
People of Asian ethnicities most likely to agree with it.
Okay. And
a bit of a mix in between for other ethnicities.
Okay. I just didn't want that to steer the direction or mislead council on their obligations with the treaty. Just wanted that to just be flagged. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One quick, I guess, thought on this is there's an elephant in the room there in roading, and I'm gathering for us to try and turn that one around. It's going to take some focus on our LTP. Would that be right, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah. And then I guess on another thought, I was just looking at some of the breakdown of the by ward participation, and I noticed Hornby was incredibly low. Is there a reason for that? Do you know?
Yeah.
Oh, gee, thanks. Thank you.
I don't have any specific reasons at this stage. I mean, as I've said to you before, around those ward ones, they were in there as sort of indicative information because ward boundaries have changed slightly too. So we've just got to be a bit careful with what we look at there. But I thought I would provide it to you so that you could see, generally speaking, what the story is.
Thank you. Certainly a focus for Hornby Ward to get the game up.
Thank you. And now I've got Kelly. I've got Sarah and Victoria, but I want to go around to everyone first and then come back to those that. So Kelly. Yep.
Me?
Yep.
Thanks for that. It's fantastic to get that type of information. Have you considered asking residents in the survey whether they've actually contacted an elected official to speak about the issues that bother them? Given that I find that a lot of the people that contact me are a lot happier after they've had a discussion with me, and perhaps I've explained a situation, given them more information than they knew. That seems to alleviate the issue for them in a number of areas. So, have you considered that?
One of the surveys, for example, does survey people who have been governance users. So governance service users. So we do survey those people who have done deputations and made presentations, but we don't necessarily ask specifically if they've directly contacted individual councillors.
Because I think that would be a really good thing to understand. You know, like you have a complaint, who have you told, rather than an anonymous thing? Who have you spoken to about it? Put your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Yeah.
Seek information.
One thing I would point out for the general satisfaction survey, people's lives are pretty quick now, and the GSS is about 25-minute survey. Mm-hmm. So finding 1,000 people prepared to spend 25 minutes who you haven't spoken to before is actually getting harder and harder in today's world.
Sure.
So we're pretty careful to manage how many questions go in, because the I'll participate versus no, that's too much of my time is a definite factor.
No, I get your point, Peter, but I would have thought that a little tick box saying, have you contacted an elected official about this, would give us some really good data.
Understood.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Celeste. Celeste.
This might be a little bit similar to Tyrone's question, but if we look at and I'll keep it quicker, but if we look at the sort of general trend from 7, and then 2019 we were holding pretty strong, and then there's quite a strong drop-off, and I do realise that there are things outside of our control, but that's, the conditions of the road, things like that are sort of fairly, I'd say, steady from post-earthquake periods. We've probably had an uplift, yet we've got quite a significant drop-off. Are we able to sort of pinpoint things that are sort of outside our control versus the kind of where we're tracking within our control, broadly speaking? So sort of, what are the trends? So, for example, some of those things could be, how are community boards resourced? Are we providing an opportunity for residents to engage with their elected members? Are there things that we can sort of look to outside of what we're measuring in terms of level of service? Because it seems to me that,
So this question is becoming like Tyrone, so if you get to the point, that would be great.
I'll leave it there.
Look, there are many, many factors that are leading to the results we're getting. One of the things we've already stated, which I think will be an opportunity for councillors to engage with heads of service. So each of the heads of service will get the results, including the head of community governance, John Purcell. So he will be looking at the results and identifying if there are any tweaks or changes that he would like to propose for the long-term plan. So this is where absolutely we can take on board the data, the feedback, and see whether in fact there are changes to be made to services, including resourcing, which would make a difference. But I think there also is a more general community level of, if you like, anxiety and dissatisfaction that includes things like COVID impacts, climate change, affordability issues. There are many things that are swirling in our community, and they do have an impact both at local and central government level. So I think satisfaction levels are also a function of what is happening in our community and a level of the social capital in our community not being as potentially as strong as it used to be.
And I just finally, quickly, with the community boards, we'll be working with them to identify where they want to give feedback, because they, from my perspective, they're also working at a level, grassroots level, where they will see where some of the issues are, and they might have some really useful insights.
Absolutely, we'd welcome that.
Great, so we've just hit 11:15, so what we'll do now is have a break, come back at 11:30, go through the two external papers, and then we'll get you back, because I suspect there'll be more questions and a bit of discussion. So thank you for that. So yeah, back at 11:30 for Christchurch NZ.